It started with a rustling sound barely louder than the breeze through the dry corn. But Ellie had lived here long enough to know the difference between wind and something alive. Ellie hadn't planned on walking the north edge of her field that morning. The sky was overcast, the air smelled like rain but didn't commit, and the rows of corn, early October gold, were whispering to each other, crisp with dryness, brittle at the edges. She had gone out to check on the fence line. A fallen limb the week before had knocked one of the lower rails loose, and she liked knowing things were in place. Predictable, secure. That's how she coped these days. It had been 15 months since her husband Walter passed. Not suddenly, just slowly enough to make her forget what peace felt like. His boots still sat by the back door. She hadn't had the heart to move them. She brought her thermos out as she always did. Just coffee and cream. No sugar. No one to remind her now that she always forgot the sugar. As she stepped over a patch of overgrown weeds near the outer fence, that's when she heard it. A sound thin, startled. Not quite a meow, not quite a cry. It came again, sharper this time, urgent. She stopped. 30 feet ahead, just off the path, sat a cardboard box. Faded, water warped, closed but loosely folded over at the top. And then, movement. Small, sudden, a flash of fur. Ellie blinked, adjusted her glasses. There were kittens, 3 of them. She approached slowly. One of the kittens, a soft gray tabby, let out a quiet chirp and tried to climb out. Another, cream-colored and a little fluffier, cowered toward the back. And then there was the third. She wasn't like the others. Her fur was darker, speckled in strange patterns, not tabby, not domestic. Her ears were tufted. Her back legs sat higher than the front, built for leaping. Her paws were wide-padded rough, like she'd walked too far. But it wasn't just her body. It was the eyes. Gold-flecked, alert, wary, in a way that made Ellie pause. This one wasn't trembling. She was studying. The box smelled faintly of gasoline and straw. Someone had driven out here, dropped them off, disappeared. Ellie's hands curled into fists, then softened. She crouched. Well, you're not supposed to be here, are you? The speckled one blinked once. Then again. She didn't run, but she didn't look away. Back at the house, Ellie placed them gently into a blanket-lined basket and tucked it near the old wood stove. The first 2 kittens, she later named them Lily and Hazel, settled quickly. Lily purred from the first hour as if she'd known love before. Hazel, more cautious, would sit under the side table but crept out for food. In time, she'd join Ellie by the couch, pawing softly at the quilted hem of her robe. But the third didn't purr. She didn't hide either. She watched. From the highest shelf she could find or from beneath the shadow of the rocking chair. Every step Ellie took, the kitten followed with eyes only. And then on the 3rd evening, as dusk leaned through the window and wrapped the room in honey-colored light, something unusual happened. Ellie yawned, long and unguarded. And the kitten mimicked it, mouth wide, head tilted slightly to the side, a low puff of air. It wasn't just mimicry, it was timed. Shared, like she was teasing her. Then came the moment Ellie would remember forever. As she looked over, the coffee cup in hand, flannel sleeves rolled to the elbows, the kitten's mouth curled slightly off-center. A small grin. It wasn't quite cat-like, not even dog-like. It was maple-like. That's the name Ellie gave her quietly 2 days later. Maple. Not because of her color, but because, like the trees outside, she had layers. Bark, roughness, sap, sweetness. And like the season, she brought change. Slowly, silently, and all at once. For the next few weeks, Ellie watched the 3 kittens settle in. Lily was the comfort seeker, always underfoot, curled in warm laundry, headbutting Ellie's calf when she walked too slow. Hazel was more distant, independent, but she'd always return by nightfall, curling on the windowsill like a sentry watching for stars. Maple was different. She didn't cling. She didn't flee, she observed. Her movements were economical. Her sounds, when she made them, were low, almost like chirps or breathy trills. Not the kind you'd expect from a domestic kitten. Ellie began to suspect. She searched online, looked through photos, bobcat. The idea scared her at first. Was she doing something illegal? Could it be dangerous? But Maple was no threat. She was cautious, gentle, wild in origin but soft in practice. She'd approach, tap her paw once against Ellie's arm, then back away again, like asking permission without knowing the word for it. And Ellie? She started laughing again, not loudly, but often, because Maple did things no one expected, like staring at her reflection for 20 minutes, or batting a single feather across the floor with the slow, deliberate patience of a Zen master, or on one unforgettable morning stretching out fully across the breakfast table and letting out what could only be described as a sigh, not because she was bored, but because she had everything she needed. A quiet room, a safe place, a person who didn't ask anything of her except to stay. There's a kind of companionship that doesn't demand. It just is. And in the weeks that followed, Ellie realized she wasn't just watching Maple adjust to her new world. She was adjusting too. The mornings weren't as still. The house didn't echo as much. She found herself boiling water, not just for tea, but for the hot water bottle Maple liked to curl next to. And most of all, Ellie wasn't lonely. She just hadn't known there were still parts of her heart that wanted to be held. Maple didn't ask to be rescued. She never meowed for attention like Lily. She never perched close like Hazel. But she stayed. And in her staying, she gave something Ellie didn't know she'd lost. Trust. You don't always get to choose how healing enters your life. Sometimes it arrives in a cardboard box. Sometimes it looks at you with wild eyes and smiles. Sometimes it never says a word, but you feel it in the quiet, in the small paws pressing softly against your hand, in the way your body remembers how to feel safe again. Ellie didn't tell anyone at first. Not about Maple, not about the grin. She thought maybe it was a one-time thing, a trick of the light, a moment just for her. But the camera disagreed. Because one morning, with the fireplace crackling and Maple perched like a queen on the windowsill, it happened again. And this time, Ellie had proof. Have you ever met an animal who looked straight through you and saw something you'd forgotten was still there? Stay with me, because Maple's story is just beginning, and the next part will make you question what you believe about wild things. Trust doesn't arrive with a purr. Sometimes it comes with teeth. And sometimes the thing that scares you at first becomes the only thing that stays. The first time Maple bit her, it wasn't out of anger. It was confusion. Ellie had leaned down to lift her from the rug, a small, harmless gesture she'd done 100 times with Lily and Hazel. But Maple didn't understand human hands yet. Her world had never been that close, that sudden. So when those little teeth sank into the soft skin of Ellie's thumb, both of them froze. No hiss, no growl, just silence. Ellie didn't pull away. She'd learned long ago that jerking back only makes fear louder. Instead, she waited. Maple released her eyes, wide ears, twitching. She didn't run. She didn't apologize. How could she? She just sat there, chest rising fast, as if realizing she might have hurt something that fed her, kept her warm, and never once tried to cage her. And in that pause, something changed. That's the strange thing about pain, Ellie thought later, as she cleaned the small cut with warm water. It has a way of drawing two lives closer if you let it. Over the next few days, Maple's wildness came through in flickers. She didn't like loud noises. The sound of the vacuum made her disappear into the narrow crawl space under the stairs. When a delivery truck rumbled past, she'd flatten her body low and stare at the window as if tracking a storm. But there were other moments, quieter, softer, that made Ellie wonder what Maple remembered from her time before. Because sometimes, in the stillest hours before dawn, Maple would crawl onto the edge of Ellie's quilt, rest one paw on her leg, and breathe in rhythm with her. That's how Ellie knew she was learning the language of peace. Ellie began reading. She found books and articles about bobcat rescue and animal rehabilitation. Wild doesn't mean dangerous, one volunteer from a wildlife shelter had written. It means unspoken. She liked that. Unspoken. So she decided to stop speaking so much around Maple. Instead of calling or coaxing, she'd wait. Move slowly. Let Maple choose when to come close. It became a silent ritual. Ellie would sit cross-legged on the floor with a small dish of food, no coaxing, no eye contact. And Maple would appear. Inch by inch. Tail low, breath steady. Each day the distance shrank by just enough to notice. Week 1, Maple ate from the far side of the dish. Week 2. She brushed Ellie's sleeve as she turned away. Week 3, Maple took a piece directly from Ellie's palm, and this time the teeth didn't hurt. They trembled. That night, as Ellie sat by the fireplace, she wrote in her notebook, "Fear is just love, without a place to land." One afternoon, a storm rolled in from the west. Heavy gray skies rained like static on the windows. The power flickered twice before going out completely. The kittens huddled together under the sofa, Lily's tail wrapped tight around Hazel's side. Maple was nowhere to be seen. Ellie lit candles. She set a bowl of warm milk near the stove. Then she heard it, a low sound halfway between a chirp and a growl. It came from the porch. There was Maple-drenched eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. Ellie opened the door slow. Maple didn't move. She was trembling fur slick against her small frame. Ellie spoke softly, barely above the sound of the rain. "Come on, sweetheart. It's just thunder." She took a step closer. Maple took a step back. Then another thunderclap rolled through the valley, sharp and hollow, and Maple jumped straight into Ellie's arms. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Ellie could feel the kitten's pulse against her palm, wild and fast like a bird trapped in flight. Then Maple pressed her face into Ellie's neck and stayed there. That's the night the distance ended. Sometimes the hardest part of trust is believing you're worthy of it. Ellie had spent months, years, really keeping her world small. Losing Walter had made her cautious. She didn't invite neighbors over anymore. She kept her curtains drawn after dusk. The world outside had become something to look at, not live in. But Maple wasn't interested in boundaries. She'd claw at the blinds until the light came through. She'd drag bits of dried grass in from the porch and drop them at Ellie's feet as if to say, "This is what the world feels like. Touch it again." Through Maple, Ellie learned that gentleness isn't the absence of wildness. It's what happens when wildness learns to breathe beside you. The two of them began to share a rhythm. Mornings, soft purring kettle on the stove. Maple perched by the window, watching cardinals hop between fence posts. Afternoons, sunlight spilling across the rug. Maple's stretched long tail flicking like a metronome. Evenings, the same armchair, the same quiet. Ellie reading aloud from her old nature journals. Maple's ears twitching with each turn of the page. They weren't alone anymore. They were a pair of strays who decided to stay. One Sunday, Ellie invited her niece Kara to visit. When Kara stepped inside, Maple froze. Her ears flattened, eyes narrowed. A low growl hummed in her throat, small but steady. "She's just protective," Ellie said quickly, voice gentle. "Give her a minute." Kara nodded and knelt down, keeping her distance. "You weren't kidding, Aunt Ellie," she whispered. "She looks like a wildcat." Ellie smiled faintly. "Maybe she is, but wild things can love too. They just take the long way there." Later, after Kara left, Maple crept onto Ellie's lap as if apologizing for the earlier fright. She rested her head there, a soft weight, and Ellie felt the purr begin uneven at first, then smooth deep, like a small engine finding its rhythm. That's how she knew Maple had crossed the invisible line between surviving and belonging. People often think rescue is about saving an animal, but sometimes it's the other way around. Ellie thought she was offering shelter to a lost creature, food, safety, warmth. But Maple was teaching her something far rarer: patience. Patience that doesn't ask for for reward. Patience that waits without resentment. The kind that builds trust not through control, but through quiet repetition. In a world that moves too fast, trust grows in stillness, in the gentle sound of paws padding across an old wooden floor. In the soft meow that isn't a request but a reassurance I'm still here. Over time, Maple began to mimic sounds, not words, but tones. When Ellie hummed softly while washing dishes, Maple would chirp back in rhythm. When Ellie laughed, Maple made a sound, a short, breathy trill that almost matched it. It became their language. A conversation with no grammar, just grace. Sometimes Ellie would close her eyes and listen to the rhythm of their home. The kettle's whistle, Maple's soft calls, the rain tapping gently against the windows. It felt alive again, like the house itself was exhaling. One evening, while the sky bruised into lavender and the fields glowed faintly in the fading light, Ellie took Maple out onto the porch. She sat in her old rocking chair. Maple curled on the railing tail, looping in slow motion. Somewhere in the distance, a bobcat's faint call echoed across the ridge. A deep, haunting sound, half roar, half yowl. Maple lifted her head, listening, then looked back at Ellie. There was a pause, something ancient in it, something that belonged to both the forest and the heart. And in that moment, Ellie understood. You can't take the wild out of a creature, but you can make it feel safe enough to show you its gentler side. She whispered, "You can stay as long as you need to." Maple blinked once, then settled beside her. We talk about animal rescue as if it's an act of charity. But what if it's a form of remembering? Remembering that love doesn't always come tidy or tame. Sometimes it bites, sometimes it hides, sometimes it tests you before it trusts you. But if you stay long enough, if you're quiet enough, you might see what Ellie saw in that small, wild face. Not just survival, but surrender. The kind that heals both sides. A few days later, something extraordinary happened. Ellie, proud of Maple's progress, took a photo. Just a simple picture near the window, Maple perched with that mischievous tilt of the head. Later, she posted it online, almost as an afterthought. The next morning, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, comments, notifications. The world had found Maple's grin. And that's when everything changed. Have you ever earned the trust of a creature who didn't owe it to you? It's like holding a heartbeat in your hands. Stay with me, because in the next part, you'll see how one small grin from a rescued bobcat kitten reached across the world and found its way back home. When the call came from the shelter, Ellie thought it would be simple. Bring her in, we'll help. Instead, the voice on the other end spoke two words that changed the quiet of her house into a question she couldn't ignore: protected species. There are moments when you understand the world in a new grammar, when a single sentence rearranges everything you thought you knew. Ellie had been living by small agreements: water, the plants, sweep the porch, feed the animals. She'd taken care of the kittens the way someone stitches a torn sweater, slow, steady, with soft hands. She never intended to break any rules. So when the wildlife shelter called and asked a few routine questions: where she found the kittens, whether they were inside a box by the road, how long she'd had them, Ellie answered plainly. Then the woman's voice grew measured, professional. "We may be looking at a bobcat cub," she said. "If so, you'll need to work with your local wildlife authority. There are regulations for wild animal rescue. Sometimes they need to be rehabilitated and released." Ellie felt the air leave her chest. Maple was not just another kitten. The word bobcat landed like a stone in a pond, ripples across her life. Here's the reality, plain and simple in many places. Animals that are wild by nature are governed by rules intended to protect both the animals and people. Wildlife centers and shelters exist so baby bobcats and orphaned animals can receive specialized care, medical checks, species, appropriate diets, and when necessary, a path back to the wild. Ellie understood that. She'd read the blog posts, bookmarked the forum threads about bobcat rescue and wild animal rehabilitation. Still, the thought of Maple being taken away felt less like paperwork and more like losing a handhold on a cliff she'd just found. The shelter offered options. They could send a volunteer to assess Maple. They could take her into their facility for evaluation. Or if Ellie wanted to keep her temporarily, she could register as a permitted wildlife caregiver under certain conditions. Seasonal permits, enclosure requirements, veterinary checks. It sounded bureaucratic, but the weight was emotional. This wasn't a form to fill. It was a choice about home. A week later, the volunteer arrived. He was a compact man in his late 40s with a calm voice and a box of gloves. He moved like someone who'd spent mornings listening to foxes and afternoons filling out grant forms, part poet, part clerk. He crouched on the porch and watched Maple, who was perched on the rail tail, coiled like a question mark. The man didn't rush. He let the porch be theirs. "Looks like a young bobcat," he said after a long look. "But not every bobcat we see needs to go to rehab. Sometimes they're separated briefly from the mother and can be reunited. Other times they're orphaned or injured, then we step in." Ellie nodded. "She came in a box near the corn. She didn't run when I got close." "That can mean she was used to people," he said. "Or it could mean she was so young she didn't understand how to be wild yet." They spoke in practical terms, the kind of language that pads the heart with facts. There were checklists: weight, reflexes, temperature, signs of dehydration, presence of parasites. Maple was examined with gloved hands and a quiet professionalism that made Ellie breathe easier. The man made notes, then looked up. "If you want to keep her," he said, "we'll need to get the paperwork started. Rehabilitation centers can be full. We can place her temporarily, but if you want to apply for a caregiver permit, there's a process." Ellie thought of the way Maple had curled into her lap during the storm. She thought of the night she'd sung softly while Maple chirped in response. She thought of Lily draped over the back of the sofa like a ribbon and Hazel's quiet oversight. She thought of the house finally feeling like a place to be again. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes." Choosing to keep a wild thing is not an act of defiance so much as an act of responsibility. Ellie wasn't being stubborn. She was being deliberate. She wanted what was best for Maple, not what felt easiest for her. Over the next few weeks, she learned the language of permits. Forms arrived in the mail. She visited the county office, filled out pages that felt like small promises: contact details, enclosure plans, emergency protocols. She met with a veterinarian who specialized in wildlife, who showed her how to administer subcutaneous fluids, how to avoid imprinting behaviors that could prevent eventual release, how to measure and record Maple's weight each morning. It was hard work. It was also healing. There's a strange symmetry in filling out forms for something that refuses to be owned. Ellie followed the rules because she wanted Maple to remain as wild as possible while also safe. She built a small enclosure on the back porch, a space with natural cover, a secure lock, and places for Maple to climb. It wasn't a cage. It was a bridge. Neighbors called. Some were curious, some worried. One man across the road who'd grown up hunting in these parts stopped by with a thermos and a quiet look. "Is she dangerous?" he asked. "Not unless you corner her," Ellie replied. "But she's not a pet. She's a wild thing learning to trust." He nodded, then said softly, "Then you're doing the right thing. Most of us think of rescue as an instant find, save go home. But sometimes rescue is a negotiation between longing and law, between what you want and what's best for the animal. It's a series of small agreements you make with yourself and with the world." Ellie's choice wasn't about control. It was about stewardship. She learned that being a caregiver for a bobcat cub meant making decisions that looked forward to a day. Maple might be better off in the wild or backward to a life where she never needed to be taken at all. That thinking changed how Ellie moved through her days. She checked Maple's enclosure before sunset closed the gate with a soft click that felt like a promise. She recorded every weight, every odd sound Maple made at night. She learned the difference between playful stalking and a nervous twitch. When Maple ate, Ellie watched with the reverence of someone watching a sunrise. There's something sacred about that care, a commitment that neither diminishes the animal's nature nor inflates the human's need to possess it. A month in, Ellie received a letter from a woman who'd seen Maple's photo in the local community group. The woman wrote about losing her husband the year before and how Maple's grin had been for her proof of small mercies. She wanted to donate to whatever the shelter needed. Ellie folded the letter and pressed her thumb to the crease. She had thought her decision was private between her Maple and a stack of paperwork, but it had rippled out. People cared. People wanted to be part of the rescue without stepping into the responsibility. that more than anything helped Ellie stay steady. The world was not a single voice telling her what to do. It was a chorus, some advising caution, some offering hands, some simply holding space. Choosing to keep Maple felt like opening a window after a year of closed rooms. It let in light and dust and the noise of the world. It brought the law into Ellie's kitchen and the shelter's procedures into her quiet evenings. It required humility, knowledge that she could be wrong, that mistakes could harm the animal, that good intentions weren't always enough. But it also required courage, the kind that looks ordinary, showing up, calling the vet when Maple's appetite dropped, patching the enclosure after a storm, answering questions from the state. It was the courage of follow-through. And in that steadiness, Maple thrived. There were moments of worry and enforceable curfew on wildlife, a neighbor's complaint about a scratched screen, but mostly there was quiet progress. Maple's weight slowly rising, her reflexes sharpening, the way she began to leap from railing to railing with cat-like precision. Then, one night after a long day of paperwork and calls, Ellie sat in her kitchen and watched Maple curl on the kitchen mat. The kitten blinked up at her, and with a slow, almost deliberate ease let out a sound that made the room tilt a chirp, then a breathy trill, followed by that uneven little grin. Ellie's phone buzzed with one more notification, this time a message from the volunteer who'd first assessed Maple. It read simply, "We're seeing more interest now. People want to learn about human wild animal companionship. Maybe there's something here to do beyond rescue." Which is how a private choice became a public conversation about what wild animals mean to us, about animal rescue and wildlife rescue, and about how a small grin can prompt a much larger question. If you've ever had to choose between what feels right and what's easy, you know the weight of small decisions. Share a quiet choice. You once made something that changed your day-to-day life and hold space for the idea that sometimes care looks like paperwork, persistence, and patience. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, Maple faces her first real disappearance, and Ellie learns how fragile trust can be when the wind picks up. It only takes one open door, one gust of wind, one moment when your guard slips and the thing you love most slips through with it. The day Maple disappeared, the sky had gone gray in the quiet, heavy way that comes before a storm. It was the kind of weather that made Ellie slow down without realizing. She moved gently around the house, boiling water for tea, folding the same towels she'd folded the day before. Maple was on the porch, curled into her usual spot under the rocking chair, the soft rattle of her breath just barely audible. Then the phone rang. Just a neighbor, a quick call, a favor about the church potluck. Ellie answered, stepping into the kitchen. When she came back 10 minutes later, the porch door was open, just barely. Just wide enough. And Maple was gone. Bobcats are not like house cats. They're curious, strong, and born with instincts that hum beneath the surface, always watching for movement, air shifts, sound. Even a young bobcat cub like Maple, raised in a safe home, retains that edge of wildness. It's not defiance. It's memory. That's what Ellie tried to remind herself as she stood frozen on the porch, eyes scanning the yard, whispering Maple's name like it might rise on the wind and find her. But she knew deep down that when a wild animal disappears, there are no guarantees. No GPS tag, no leash to follow, only hope and pine needles and silence. Ellie searched until it got dark. She walked the tree line, first calling softly. Then the old trail that ran behind the property, the one Walter used to walk in the early mornings with a thermos of black coffee and a book of bird calls. The rain started in small taps, just enough to mist her glasses, soak the cuffs of her flannel sleeves. Still, she kept walking, past the creek, past the abandoned greenhouse, past the rusted-out truck that had been swallowed by wildflowers years ago. She found nothing. No paw prints, no fur, no sound. Back home, the porch was still empty. Lily and Hazel were curled together by the hearth, but they were uneasy ears, twitching restless without their sister. Ellie tried to sleep, but her thoughts circled. What if Maple ran too far? What if she couldn't find her way back? What if someone saw her and didn't understand? What if trust wasn't enough? There's a particular ache that comes with losing something you nurtured from the start. It isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It settles into the body like damp air, filling the spaces behind your ribs. Every corner of the house feels too quiet. Every closed door becomes a question mark. And it wasn't just that Maple was gone. It was what she took with her, Ellie's sense of progress. The rhythm they'd built together. The weight of a small body resting on her legs as the sun went down. Ellie made a pot of tea and left the porch light on, not because she believed Maple would follow it home, but because she needed to believe something still reached out. In wild animal rescue, disappearance is part of the story. It's not always tragic. Sometimes it's natural, a sign of readiness, a movement toward instinct. But Maple wasn't ready, and neither was Ellie. The idea of losing her felt like losing a chapter that hadn't finished being written. And yet, part of loving any creature, especially a wild one, is accepting that its path may not always include you. That no matter how much care you offer, it might still walk away. Not out of rejection, but because that's what it was born to do. That tension, the pull between freedom and safety, is the heart of every rescue, and every relationship that matters. On the third day, Ellie wandered back to the old greenhouse. It wasn't much anymore, just a frame, really. The glass long since gone, the vines overtaking the corners. But it held memory. Years ago, she and Walter had tried to grow tomatoes there. It never quite worked, but the effort left its mark. Scratches on the wooden shelves, a bent watering can still tucked into the corner. She stepped inside more out of habit than hope. And there, tucked beneath the shelf where the light pooled in soft gold, was Maple. Drenched, muddy, eyes open but dim. She didn't run. She didn't move at all. Ellie dropped to her knees. Oh, sweet girl. Carefully, she wrapped her in the old flannel jacket she used for yard work. Maple didn't resist. She just breathed shallow and slow against Ellie's chest. Back home, Ellie cleaned her up. Warm cloth, slow hands, chicken broth warmed on the stove. Maple didn't purr, but she leaned into the touch, and that was enough. When someone you love comes back, not because you called, not because you chased them, but because they chose to return, it changes you. There was no apology, no grand reunion. Just two lives battered by time and weather, finding each other again in the soft silence after fear. And sometimes that's more powerful than any, I'm sorry. People often talk about the resilience of wild animals, their strength, their instincts. But what they forget is how vulnerable that strength can become when it meets gentleness. Maple didn't just survive out there because she was wild. She made it back because she'd been loved. She returned not out of habit, but out of memory. She remembered Ellie's hands, the sound of her voice, the way the house smelled after rain, the taste of chicken and the feel of a quilt beneath her paws. That's what animals carry with them if you've given them a home, not just a place. Maple had been given a choice, and she chose to come back. It took a few days for Maple to recover. Ellie kept her close but didn't hover. She let her sleep on the windowsill, left the back door open during the warmest part of the day. There was no need for questions, just time. But something had shifted. Maple's eyes lingered longer. Her steps were more measured. She stayed in the room now, even when the door creaked, even when the phone rang. And one morning, as Ellie sat sipping her coffee, Maple climbed onto the table, sat squarely in front of her, and smiled. That same crooked, wild, untrainable grin, as if to say, "You worried, didn't you?" And Ellie laughed, really laughed. It was the first time since Walter's funeral that she let herself. Have you ever waited for something to come back, not knowing if it would, but hoping anyway? Maybe it was a pet. Maybe it was trust. Maybe it was a part of yourself. If so, you're not alone. Stay with me, because what happened next proved that love doesn't tame the wild. It just gives it a reason to stay. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but sometimes it's a crooked grin on the face of a rescued bobcat kitten that says everything we didn't know we needed to hear. It wasn't planned. Not the photo, not the moment, not what happened next. Ellie had just finished wiping down the table, sunlight stretching across the kitchen floor like honey, and Maple had wandered in, tail flicking with slow intent. She didn't leap, didn't stalk. She climbed deliberate up onto the table like she owned the afternoon. Sat right in front of Ellie's book, tilted her head, curled her mouth just slightly into that now unmistakable expression, that grin. Ellie laughed, warm and deep. "You're gonna break the internet, you know." And then, without thinking too hard, she snapped the picture. There are certain animal expressions that catch fire: online puppies with their heads cocked, kittens mid-yawn, parrots that sound like toddlers, but a bobcat cub, smiling like she'd just told you a secret. That was new. Ellie shared the photo in a small online forum for wildlife rescue volunteers. Just a few hundred people. A caption that read, "Maple has opinions about my tea selection." It should have ended there. But the internet has a strange way of deciding what matters. Within 24 hours, the post had been shared to a larger Facebook page. Then Reddit. Then Instagram. Then local news. By the end of the week, Maple's grin had made it to a morning talk show in Denver. One evening, Ellie opened her inbox and found a message from a woman in Pennsylvania. "It was only 3 sentences. I lost my cat last fall. Haven't smiled since. But today I saw Maple's face and laughed out loud. Thank you." There were more messages, from a nurse in Boise, a man recovering from surgery in Des Moines, a widow who said Maple's grin made her believe in gentle things again. Ellie read each one. Some she printed and tucked into a small journal by the door. Some she carried with her in the quiet moments, letting them sink in like sunlight through window glass. She had never set out to be a storyteller, but it turns out joy is contagious, even when it comes on 4 paws and wears wild fur. It was a strange feeling seeing the world fall in love with a moment that had just hours earlier belonged to Ellie alone. Part of her wanted to protect it, keep it between the two of them like a folded note passed quietly in class. But another part, one she hadn't felt in a long while, wanted to share. Not for attention, not for fame, but because joy is heavier when you keep it to yourself and lighter when you pass it on. That grin, Maple's grin, had carried something in it. Not comedy, not cuteness, but truth. The kind that says, yes, it's been hard, but we're still here and we're still capable of joy. In animal rescue, we talk a lot about survival, shelter, rehabilitation, reintroduction. But there's something that often gets overlooked: what happens when the rescued become healers in their own right. Maple wasn't just surviving anymore. She was reaching. With her face, her voice, her strange and playful little grin, she was reminding people that wild animals aren't just relics of a vanishing world. They're mirrors. They show us what we still have the capacity to feel if we slow down long enough to notice. 2 weeks later, a local paper asked to do a story. Ellie almost said no. She wasn't used to interviews. Cameras made her uneasy. But when the young woman from the paper arrived with soft questions and a wool coat still dusted with hay, Ellie said yes. They sat on the porch. Maple paced the railing, tail flicking with mild suspicion. The reporter asked simple things. How did they meet? What made Maple smile like that? Ellie answered honestly. She doesn't perform. She just exists. And sometimes when the light is right and she's feeling safe, she lets something slip. And we get lucky enough to witness it. The article ran with the headline, "The Wild Smile That's Softening the Internet." Ellie liked that. The house felt different now, not because it was famous, but because it had become a place where healing didn't just happen, it multiplied. People sent cards, drawings. One little boy from Oregon mailed a handmade booklet titled 101 Funny Faces of Maple. In it were sketches of cats with wide eyes, big teeth, and crooked grins. Ellie framed it. It hung in the hallway now near the pantry where Maple liked to scratch the wall just enough to leave her mark. This wasn't just about viral fame. It was about connection. Between strangers, between species, between one moment and the next. We're so used to chasing the extraordinary that we forget the most moving stories are often quiet. A baby bobcat curled on a sunlit table. A woman laughing for the first time in weeks. A shared glance that says, I see you. I trust you. I'm okay now. Maple didn't need training to do what she did. She didn't need a script or a handler. She just needed a safe space, a gentle rhythm, and someone willing to stay close without asking her to be anything other than what she already was. That's the secret behind so many heartwarming stories. They don't happen because we force them. They happen because we wait long enough for trust to take root. One morning, Ellie received a call she didn't expect. It was from a wildlife advocacy group, one that partnered with shelters and sanctuaries across the country. They'd seen Maple's story, and they wanted Ellie to speak at their annual gathering. Not just about Maple, but about the healing that happens in between the space where humans and wild animals don't just coexist, but connect. Ellie looked at Maple curled beside the wood stove tail, twitching in her sleep. She thought about saying no, but instead she said, "When is it? Have you ever shared a moment with an animal that felt like the whole world paused just for the two of you? A look, a sound, a gesture that made you feel understood. If so, I hope you remember it. And if not, yet stay open. Because joy has a way of finding its way to you, even when it's wearing spots, whiskers, and a grin no one sees coming." Stick around, because in the final chapter, Ellie takes the story one step further. And what unfolds might just change the way we think about wild things forever. Some stories don't end with a goodbye. They end with a beginning you never saw coming. A quiet promise whispered through fir, forest, and memory. There's still more love left in the world. Maple didn't return to the wild. Not because she couldn't survive, but because she chose something different. And maybe in some ways so did Ellie. What began as a rescue became a rhythm, a bond, a language made from glances, small sounds, and soft pauses. The kind of companionship that doesn't need permission to exist, it just settles in and stays a while. Ellie still filed every report, met with every inspector. She kept Maple's status updated, maintained her wildlife caregiver license, and followed every ethical guideline. She wasn't trying to turn Maple into a pet. She was simply letting her be. And in doing so, she created the very thing a wild animal rescue sometimes forgets: space for the animal and the human to heal at the same time. In most animal rescue stories, there's a clear arc: found, rehabilitated, released. A wild bobcat cub like Maple would typically be raised until she could return to the woods. But not every story fits that pattern. Some animals, especially those found too young, too changed by human contact, fall into what rescue centers call the in-between. Too wild to be domesticated, too socialized to release. That's where Maple stayed, but what she became was something new. She became a living bridge between worlds. People from around the country started writing to Ellie not just about Maple's grin, but about their own stories. Stories of grief, of caretaking, of animals who'd stayed long after they were expected to leave, dogs who sensed illness before symptoms, cats who curled beside hospice beds, birds who sang only to one person. There was something in Maple's eyes, her quiet but unmistakable expressions, that said, "I'm still here. And so are you." At the wildlife conference that fall, Ellie spoke to a room of strangers. She stood behind a wooden podium, clutching a photo of Maple in one hand and a small dog-eared notebook in the other. The notebook held her daily logs, Maple's weight, appetite, behavior, but tucked inside the back cover were things she'd never shared with anyone. Short phrases scribbled late at night. Maple looked at the window today like she remembered something. She placed her paw on my chest and didn't move for 3 minutes. She made a sound I'd never heard. Not fear, not hunger, just presence. Ellie read those aloud, slowly, letting the room feel what she had felt moments too subtle to film, too intimate for headlines. And when she looked up, the room was silent. Still. Some were crying. Afterward, a woman came up to her and whispered, "That wasn't just a bobcat story. That was a human one." Ellie smiled. Maybe they're the same. Sometimes we think love has to be loud, grand, proclaimed. But Maple taught Ellie that real love doesn't need to announce itself. It lingers, it watches, it stays close when you're sad. It doesn't fix anything, just sits beside you long enough that healing doesn't feel so far away. Ellie stopped calling Maple rescued after a while, because the truth was, she didn't know who rescued who anymore. What if animal rescue wasn't just about the animal? What if it's also about reclaiming something in ourselves? Something gentle, unhurried, something the world taught us to hide or push aside or move past too quickly. Maple didn't give Ellie back her old life. She gave her a new one, quieter, wiser, rooted in presence, in patience, in the pause between heartbeats, in the wild bobcat kitten who grinned at her one morning and never stopped showing her how to stay. And Maple became more than a story. She became a reminder that even the things we fear, wildness, grief, uncertainty, can soften in the presence of trust. Today, Maple still lives with Ellie. She sleeps on the porch when it's warm, by the stove when it rains. She chirps when Ellie sings, trills when Ellie talks. She still grins sometimes, not every day, but enough. And when she does, it always feels like the first time. Lily and Hazel are older now. They nap more than they play, but when Maple curls beside them, tail wrapped neatly, breath steady, Ellie knows this isn't just a shelter. It's a sanctuary. Not the kind with gates or signs, but the kind built from choice, from daily care, from a woman who stayed still long enough for something wild to stay with her. So now, maybe take a breath. Think about the animals that have walked through your life, furred, feathered, or even unseen. Was there one that made you laugh? One that helped you through something hard? One that showed up when you didn't know you needed it? You don't have to have a bobcat in your kitchen to know what it means to be loved quietly. You just have to notice the small moments that feel big. And if Maple's story brought something to your heart, if her grin stayed with you, even after the screen goes dark, consider subscribing. We tell stories like this every week. Stories that speak softly. Stories that help us remember we're not alone. Stories that matter. And if you'd like to go one step further, you can tap the super thanks or donate through the link below. Every contribution helps support real-life wildlife shelters and animal rescue centers, doing the patient, often invisible work of healing both animals and people, one small act of care at a time. Because healing isn't loud, it's quiet. It's a paw on your lap, a meow that sounds like a song, a crooked grin from a bobcat kitten who learned how to stay. And maybe, so can we.